I stand on the legacy of millions of women that come before me. And I think, what can I do? What can I do to lift the mountain so that the next generation of women can see further and farther? That's actually from one of my favorite poets, modern day poet Rupi Kapoor, Rupi Kaur. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is, how are you thinking through the legacy that you're leaving within you, but also how you're leaving for the next generation? A few things to share with you as far as legacy and what sisterhood means to me. A few weeks ago, I was at a conference and we were talking a little bit about D&I work. And the speaker was a researcher, was an academic. And I'm not sure how many of you in the room are academics. Any academics here? Anybody? Oh, great. We have some of my people. Okay. So a couple of the researchers that were in the room that are published incredible things. There's this term, and I'm not going to bore you with the details or read you a 100-page research paper, but I'm going to share with you a term in research called reflexivity. Anybody know about the term of reflexivity? Anybody have heard of that? Well, reflexivity, if you haven't heard of it, is all about your perception. So once you conduct the research and everything is happening, that first statement that you read before the research paper is basically a statement of reflexivity from the researcher saying, this is my background. So this is my implicit bias that I bring to the table based on my background and what I do. This would have probably skewed a little bit of the research result because of my personal background. And I say that because I think everybody here around the table thinks to themselves, we all come from different backgrounds. Would you agree? That's pretty common knowledge. We all come from different backgrounds, different upbringings, that sort of thing. But yet, when we're faced with challenges, when we're faced with conflicts, it's almost like we forget about that. Like that skewed perspective doesn't apply. It's the me frame. So I'm going to give you a reflexivity for this talk from my point of view. I'm a first-generation Cuban-American woman born and raised here in South Florida. I got my mama in the back, so I got to make her proud. So first-generation Cuban-American woman born and raised here in South Florida. First generation to go and fully complete school as well. So background as far as bachelor's degree, master's degree, that sort of thing, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. Also was raised by my mom, by my grandmother, strong women background. All of my bosses were women. All of them. All of my bosses, I know. All of my first cousins were women. All right? I'm telling you, all my first cousins were women. I tell you this, my entire life's work has been about lifting the ability for women and girls. So when I talk to you about reflexivity, I'm going to tell you all, I'm biased. I'm biased as hell. You know why? Because I am here for it. I'm here to lift women and girls. I live it through and through. But I share with you about sisterhood because I'm a product of the women that came before me. I'm a product of the women that haven't even come into my grasp, right? I'm a product of that. And so that's why I share with you my reflexivity, my background, because you want to know who's that person on stage and what does she bring to the table, right? So I share that with you. Let's talk a little bit about fear, right? And what that looks like for each and every one of us, because it's different. I haven't come to grips with this, but I'm a pseudo recovering control freak. I don't think I've let the control go of the fact that I will never just fully. How many of you can relate to that? Do we control everything? I mean, to the point that I will tell you, we were coming into the building and I was bringing things, my mom was bringing, she's like, let me help you with that box. I'm like, okay, great, that's fine. And then there was there was a nice gentleman who was like, ma'am, would you like some help with that? She said nothing of the sort. And I'm like, Mom, do you want some help? And no, we have to keep going, right? We keep going. And it's interesting because growing up with my Cuban grandmother, Abuela Fifi, so for you all to know, that was her name. That is her name, Abuela Fifi. Growing up with her, I don't know what it was, but I attested strong woman with the ability that you had to do everything by yourself. A strong woman was you had to do it by yourself because that's what I saw. I saw women in my life doing everything by themselves. So I associated automatically that if I had to do everything by myself, then I was strong. That's what would it take to be strong. Here's the thing about doing everything by yourself. It gets tiring. I'm exhausted. Are you exhausted? I'm exhausted. It gets tiring. But guess what? Because it keeps building, right? Gets to a point there you break. The fear sets in because the anxiety of disappointing others is so strong, right? With a winning sisterhood, with people around you, if someone wants to help you, let them help you. Whether it's a box carrying up the stairs, or whether it's just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I know you're connected with so-and-so. Do you mind giving me a warm introduction? Do you mind giving me a warm introduction? Right? How are we asking for help? We have, how many people do we have here? About 200 individuals plus. There's an ability for you to ask for help right now and not let that anxiety or that perception of fear of I have to do everything for myself, by myself, without anybody else, because I'm the only one that can do it. Because I know for me, that's what it was. It was about control. I'm like, oh, well, you know what? They can't do it because I always have to step in. Do you ever give that excuse? I have to step in and just do it. It's because they don't do it your way. That's the reason. But not because they don't do it the right way. It's just because they don't do it your way. So I tell you that because fear is embedded within those things. So besides owning my firm and doing the work that we do with nonprofit organizations and corporations, we raise money for nonprofit organizations and we create corporate social responsibility. I'm a professor. Naturally, I'm an academic as well. I'm a professor. And I want to just out front tell you the key takeaways because I don't want you to wait till the end. These are the things that you're going to take away with you today. So number one, we're going to talk a little bit about conquering your haters and as it relates to sisterhood and how that is going to lift you up. Number two, we're going to talk already about, if you don't already have, how do you implement and identify your own board of directors. All right, so that's number two. And number three, we're gonna level up your accountability because that's what we're here for. I love the energy and saying, okay, great. You know, this is great, rah, rah, I'm so energized, I'm so inspired, but where's the action at? What's the next step for you? What's that next little moment that you're going to take after this conference? What's that next connection? What's that next step? So we're gonna level up a little bit of your accountability. I'm going to take a moment for you to digest this quote. I love Brené Brown. I don't know how many of you love her, but I love myself some Brené Brown. This quote was inspired by, actually, the premise of this quote was inspired by Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt, one of our former presidents of the United States, he has an incredible speech called Man in the Arena. And the speech goes that, you know, it's so easy for critics to tell you what you're doing wrong because they're not in there. So easy for you to judge people when you're not actually doing it. Here's the thing that I want to share with you is as far as people in the arena, I'm not interested in your feedback if you're not getting your ass kicked with me. I'm not interested in it. Right? I'm not interested. If you're not doing the hard work, I'm not interested in your feedback. And I tell you this because here's the thing as it relates to feedback and what you're doing. There's two types of critics in your life. I'm going to tell you those people. There's your inner critic, because God knows we have one. inside of us telling us what they're doing and who she is and why you're doing that. And oh my God, did you see that step that you made or you stopped doing that, right? That inner critic. And then there's the other, everybody else, right? So that inner critic, I want you to start thinking about developing a sense of awareness for this person. Stop ruminating, stop overthinking it, but also ask yourself what advice you'd give a friend if you were in that position. Examine the evidence at hand when you're talking to yourself. And lastly, balance acceptance with self-improvement. I know, listen, I'm a person that loves to continuously improve what I'm doing, but at some point, we just have to think to ourselves, you know what, I'm satisfied. I woke up today and this is good enough for me. And so this is something that we want to start thinking about as far as really internalizing that inner critic. As far as everybody else, and here's the thing, and this is the biggest thing that I want to share with you here, is what we feed grows, and what we starve dies. What we feed grows, and what we starve dies. So the more fuel that we put into others' words about us, the more it grows. Not only the inner critic, but everything else. The less we feed it, it starves and it dies. So I want to share that with you because it's an important thing to understand. And it's also important to how we conquer the things overall. So as far as, asking yourself whether you can learn something, right? So if someone tells you something, asking yourself how you can learn from it. I'm a negotiation expert. That's something that I do, and I help with the sales and fundraising and things like that. And one of the biggest things that I do is mirroring and labeling. So to me, if someone's asking me or someone comes at me, I usually ask them how and what question. Well, what do you mean by that? Oh, it seems like you don't want me to succeed in this area. Is that the case? So mirroring is about how you are asking. One, you're not deflecting. You are really diffusing the situation, and then what we're doing is labeling in the sense of like, I'm seeing this happening. It seems like you're telling me this. Is that the case? And they might say, oh, no, actually, that's not what the case was. Or they might, check themselves and say, okay, I see who I'm dealing with now. So it's just a matter of how you mirror and labeling, but it's all about how you ask how and what questions. And lastly, listen to criticism, but don't give up. Stick to those convictions that you have. So this is another one. In 2020, one of the things that I was sitting in a retreat, actually was January 2020 with my NAWBO sisters. If you don't know, the National Association of Women Business Owners, have a lot of them that are here, that are present here this morning. And we had a yearly retreat or a biannual retreat, and we were sitting there, and the speaker was saying, well, we need to take one step forward to whatever goal you wanted to do. At that time, January 2020, I had this vision of one day writing a book. I didn't think I was going to be a best-selling author. That's not what my intention is. I wanted to just write a book and do that. I ended up doing that in 2020, which was an interesting journey in itself. But it was called Building Badassery. And for me, Building Badassery was rooted in the way that we brought sisterhood together. And Badassery, as you can see here, is really about that sustainability of the state of mind, right? How you feel. Like if you wake up in the morning and you're putting on a pair, and you know when you feel confident, when you feel good about yourself, or you listen to the music and you just know you just have to, you come up, it's like the state of being. And I was wondering to myself, how do we sustain that? Like, how come we just can't do that every single day? And it's a series of rituals that we do, but Badassery, for me, it's about resilience. It's about going forward and doing anything and everything to not let people get in my way, because simply I won't allow it to. That's what Badassery is, right? And so I say, it's me. I put myself me. I quoted myself. And I think you should quote yourself too, right? Like, who's Janine San Luis? Well, that's me. I'm here.